Check. All right, we are recording. All right, so today I'm chatting to Nick Usborne, who is a copywriter for quite a long time, actually since 1979. He worked with the biggest companies in the world on the topic, helping them, ranging from Apple, Citibank, Yahoo, Disney, the New York Times, among many other big companies. He also has online training programs which helps business coaches, consultants, small business owners avoid the hype that plagues so many other copywriting courses and training so they could focus on what matters. So Nick has a lot of experience when it comes to business and copywriting. So I thought to have you on to chat on the topic. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julian. Delighted to be here. I really appreciate being invited.
Yeah, could you share maybe a bit about your background before we delve into some of the other topics?
Background, like how I got started?
Yeah, how you got started in copywriting?
It was absolute accident. Hey, it's a funny thing. Like today, when I talk to my kids about how they got into such and such and such, they can kind of trace the history through almost like through social media, through the web. Like, here's the story of how I got here. So you mentioned I've been doing this since 1979, and of course there was no internet. So when I think back,
very different world. Yeah.
It's all kind of vague. I have no record of how things actually happened. I just have these memories, and memories are a little bit fallible. But basically, it was I got into copywriting marketing just by accident. I finished school. I was meant to go to university, but didn't. I kind of dropped out and traveled the world a bit. Did some other fun stuff. Behaved badly in a good teenage kind of way. And then my dad gently suggested that I actually get off the sofa and go up to London and get a proper job. And, you know, by all means, come back when you've got a job. So I ended up sleeping on the floor in a shared house in North London with about 5 other people all sharing the house. They had the bedrooms, I had the floor. And one Sunday morning, stop me if I'm rambling too long, but one Sunday morning we're having breakfast and this guy's talking about some experience he had at work. And I said, well, what do you do at work? He said, I work in an advertising agency. And I said, what's that? I had no idea, totally ignorant. And so he explained, and I said, well, is it fun? Because it sounds like fun. He said, yes, it's fun. And this is like the Mad Men days, right? So it really was fun back then. And so I said, fine. Everyone went to work on Monday morning. I took out the yellow pages and I typed up a letter, a one-page letter to 20 different ad agencies, all starting with A, B, or C in London. And I had no resume because I had no experience. I just had nothing really. I had a big fat void after finishing high school, but I can't remember what was in the letter, but I got 3 interviews. Got 1 job offer and I took it, which was amazing. It was the first proper job I ever had in my life. And they moved me around different departments in the agency. And as soon as I got into the creative department and somebody asked me to write something, it was like a light went off. Like, oh my God, this is what I do. This is what I do. And it's extraordinary because it was literally like that. It was a moment of self-discovery. I thought, oh my God, this is what I do. And I loved it. I loved the craft from that very first moment. And like you said, that was 79. So we're now 40th anniversary and I love it. I love the craft just as much today as I did. So I got there by accident. I had no qualifications whatsoever. I fell in love on day one. And I count myself just massively fortunate. I mean, there are so few people who can go through a 40-year of work and still do the same thing and still love what they do. So I'm hugely fortunate in that regard. And, you know, I've raised family and it's been great.
I have a follow-up question. How did you know that you really loved it? Because I think today many people struggle to find that thing they love. People jump from project or job. Like, did you enjoy it? Were you good at it? What are the components of it? Maybe just very interesting to hear.
It's and it's really difficult. You know, you're touching on this whole thing of finding your passion and all that kind of stuff. And it's incredibly hard. And honestly, for me, it was accidental. Actually, I'll tell you, I knew about being a copywriter actually a few days before I entered the creative department because I was working with a different group within the agency and the account executive group, who are the intermediaries between the creatives and the client. And they said, we briefed the creative department and then they write and create an ad, and we look at it, and before presenting it to the client, that if we don't think the creative department has got it right, if we don't think if the copy is good, we send it back to the creative department. And I hadn't even been in the creative department yet, but I had this visceral like reaction of like, who do you think you are to second guess the creative people? I knew at that point that I was one of the creative people and not one of the management people. Then I went in the creative department, and I didn't know in any rational sense that this was it. It just hit me like a bolt out of the blue. I didn't plan for it. I don't think I could plan for it. The only thing that I did there, and what I've done always in my life, is there's a phrase for this. It's like, it's increasing the surface area for the opportunity to get lucky. All right. So I had actually tried a ton of different things. A lot of them like manual. I actually worked as a stonemason's apprentice for a year after school. I worked building racing yachts. I did all this kind of weird stuff, just waiting for the moment when I thought, wow, this is it. And at that point, like I say, so that was triggered by my dad saying, hey, get off the sofa, come back when you've got a proper job. It was triggered. It's just fortunate that someone else in that house worked in an ad agency, and I just ran off in that direction. But throughout my career, everything that has worked out well for me has been where I see kind of an opportunity somewhere, and I just say yes. I just not blindly, but I say yes. Often when it's very scary, I say yes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm constantly trying to increase the surface area of my opportunity to get lucky. Because I think that's a lot of it as well. Yeah. A lot of it, a lot of experts and staff saying, oh, well, it's all down to me being brilliant. And I think that's hardly ever true. I think mostly an awful lot of success is down to serendipity and luck and just being fortunate. But I think we can increase the surface area of our likelihood of getting lucky. And that's a mindset thing, I think.
Yeah, I like the mindset. It's a good recipe. Try as many things as possible and see what you like out of them. Cool. So yeah, maybe we can chat copywriting from here. Maybe you can define just a bit what is copywriting, and then you can go into what is conversational copywriting as well.
All right. So copywriting, I guess, is words that are put together to be persuasive, to persuade a change in viewpoint, there's general advertising copy where I may want you to change your opinion about a particular brand. Like I can do some ads for Nike. They're not like designed to sell you a pair of shoes or athletic wear today. They're designed, the ads are designed to make you think about Nike in a particular way. So that's general advertising copy. But again, it's about I'm trying to shift perceptions. If I'm a direct response copywriter, which online more and more people are, in other words, they're trying to get you to do something right now, sign up, subscribe, download, buy this membership, buy this product, whatever it is, that's direct response copywriting. And now I'm using words in a very, a much more directed way to persuade you to do something right now. So that's the copywriter's task. And truth be told, there's not a business on the planet that can survive without copy. You go to a website, strip out all the images and just leave the words, you still got something. Go to a website, leave the images, strip out the words, you got nothing. It's without words, you can't sell. Sometimes it's in an email, sometimes it's on a sales page, sometimes it can be in a conversation like this. But whether they're spoken or written or however they're presented, if you want to make a sale, you need words to do that. So that's copywriting. That's the craft of copywriting. So there's a lot. For about 10 years, I specialized in direct response copywriting. I wrote direct mail, junk mail, if you will. So I know that stuff. I've done that stuff. I've got 15 awards in the cupboard somewhere in the basement for my direct response copywriting. So I know how to sell in that direct way. And there's a lot of people learning that online and building businesses with direct response copy and building automated marketing funnels and that whole kind of marketing automation thing. And there's a ton of people doing that and executing it well. I guess I've over my 40-year career as a copywriter, I've kind of been hopefully moving forward in my views and opinions about what works best. And I think there is a real kind of shelf life limit on this hard charging direct response approach online. I think people are already getting kind of what I sometimes call funnel fatigue. I sign up for stuff, I'm put into an automated funnel, and I get these relentless barrage of emails every day. And then some of them in the end say, Nick, I can't believe you haven't, what's wrong? What's wrong, Nick? Why haven't? And the trouble is the more funnels that are created, the more marketers begin to sound the same. Because it's like painting by numbers in a sense. It's beginning to set this kind of homogenous feel to marketing online. So I'm a huge advocate of what I call conversational copywriting, which is actually stepping back and recognizing that actually perhaps our most persuasive voice is not sounding like a direct marketer, but being a really persuasive version of ourselves. So imagine that you're married, right? And you travel.
Yes, I'm married.
And your wife says, hey, next let's get to Norway. And you say, no. I want to we should go to Morocco. And you get into a conversation and you really want to go to Morocco. So you're being as persuasive as you can, but in a respectful way with your wife. You're being, hey, look at a kid. Look at a kid trying to persuade somebody, a parent, can I stay up late? Can I have this video game? Can I go and play with my friends? Kids can be incredibly persuasive. They know how to sell. They know how to do it with conversation. They understand something absolutely fundamental to selling, which is if you want to persuade somebody to do something, you touch them emotionally.
Kids are the best copywriters.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Kids are the best copywriters. Or watch a kid with a lemonade stand or a cookie stand at the end of the driveway and listen to them sell. We all know how to be persuasive through a conversational approach. We all know it. We've had it beaten out of us. We've had it educated out of us. So we go to school and we're taught how to write properly. We go to university and we start writing this weird academic gobbledygook. We go to business school or we work for a business and then we start learning this really weird corporate nonsense writing. And we forget that we actually all know how to be persuasive conversationally. We've just had it educated and beaten out of us. Kids know how to do it. If we think back, know how to do it. And I come across like I talk about conversational copywriting as not only being the antidote to the kind of adversarial hard pushing approach, but it's also it's the cure for like corporate gobbledygook, all that nonsense you read on corporate websites. And I think there are you've talked to me before about this group of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs in their 20s seeking to build a business, make their mark on the world. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of them would love an approach that is not old school adversarial push, hard charging sales. But a lot of that younger generation would love to find a more authentic, natural, conversational way to sell. And so some people push back at me. They say, hey, Nick, you should know better. You've been a copywriter for decades. You should know better than advocating this kind of softly approach. To which I reply, well, that's nonsense. This isn't softly approach. This is a better approach. There's a whole field of science out there called neuromarketing, which actually...
Called what?
Neuromarketing.
Neuromarketing, okay.
All right. So this is based on neuroscience. So if I can do a little... Can I do a little scientific ramble for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So neuromarketers, what they do is they rent time on MRI machines, which are those fancy machines in hospitals that kind of measure actually oxygen levels in the blood in your brain. So
what do you mean rent marketing?
Well, yeah, so marketers rent time on these machines. They slide someone in. It's like that kind of donut thing, and you see it in the movies. People slide in.
I've done one MRI. I know.
You've done one. All right, you've done an MRI scan. So anyway, a marketer will put this marketing group will slide you in, and they will show you, say, a picture of a roaring tiger or a hissing snake about to strike. And then on the screen, looking at your brain, they will see the amygdala, that very primitive part of your brain at the top of your brainstem, lights up like a Christmas tree, because that is the fight and flight center of your brain. You see something scary, like a lion or a tiger or a snake, and your amygdala kicks in. You don't think, you don't pause, you either fight or you run. It's a survival thing, very, very primitive part of our brain. So here's a funny thing. Now I'm going to show you, you're still in the MRI machine. I'm going to show you a video of a used car salesman using that hard charging sales technique in your face, really pushing you to buy a car. You get the exact same thing happens in the brain. The amygdala lights up. It is perceived by the fight and flight center of your brain as a threat. And we know this instinctively, right? When someone tries to sell at you too quickly, somebody comes to the front door or you're buying a car or whatever. When someone sells too hard, you actually almost physically feel like stepping back. Yeah, you can actually, sometimes you can almost feel a chemical change in your body, because a chemical change in your body is taking place. Your brain is being flooded with cortisol, which is part of the fight and flight response. And that's a stressor. You feel stressed. You want to get away from this threat, whether it's a tiger or a salesperson. Now, if within the same MRI machine, I actually show you a video of two people, hey, at a coffee shop, just talking, both with coffee, just talking to each other, a conversation between friends. Amygdala goes to sleep, prefrontal cortex lights up, and this is where we make our decisions about, hey, it's where we process emotions with our relationships with others. It's where we do our deeper thinking. We make our choices and decisions. So there is real science behind the idea that stop pushing, because that stimulates fight or flight, and start engaging, because that actually keeps the brain now is actually being flooded now with things like dopamine, like happy drugs, feel-good drugs, rather than the stressors like cortisol. If you engage people in a more conversational tone as you persuade them, it actually is a feel-good experience for them. And what that does is it builds trust. It's disarming. Hey, if a kid will talk to you trying to persuade you, and that kids are incredibly disarming. They know how to bring down your defenses. So old school direct response stimulates defense. The conversational approach is more disarming. It builds trust. It engages. It makes people think, oh, hey, this guy's different. I can trust. I feel comfortable here. I'm going to listen more to what this guy has to say. I trust this guy. I'm going to buy from this guy. I'm not going to feel so anxious about making this purchase now. Do you see what I'm saying about the difference? Yeah. And there is a basis in science, and there is I've got some copywriting friends who, not very far from where you are right now, there's a gentleman by the name, Drayton Bird, lives in Bristol, England. Drayton has been a copywriter for over 60 years. He was a colleague of David Ogilvy's. And he and I have conversations, and I interviewed him, and he made the point that the best copywriting has always been conversational. And he's absolutely right. Like when I started out, I was a real fanboy of a few copywriters from London in the 1970s, 1980s. And you could take one of their ads, their print ads, and you could read it out loud, and it felt totally natural, totally sincere. And I use that as a litmus test today, whether it's my copy or someone else's copy. I read it out loud. If I feel embarrassed because it's like hard charging adversarial pushy stuff, then you know that when you read it out loud. If it's ridiculous business gobbledygook, you feel it when you read it out loud. But if it's conversational copy, if it's really good copy, engaging copy, then it just feels absolutely natural as you read it.
Can you give a quick example maybe of a conversational copy, maybe like 1 to 2 sentences versus regular copy, just to show what is right and what would be wrong, for example, to use, if you have something?
I have an example, actually. I have an example here of not so much hard charging, but nonsense. All right. So here's something. Actually, I took this from text on an advertising agency website, which is kind of ironic. So these are professional communicators. And here's what they write. Here's what they do. They apply design thinking and stimulate creativity through co-creation initiatives. Did you get that?
More or less.
Do you understand what I just said?
Honestly, I think I lost you in the middle.
Yeah, I know. So, and it's a short sentence. Apply design thinking and stimulate creativity through co-creation initiatives. So you read that out loud and you think, hang on, this is nonsense. Yeah. And it took me a while to translate, but what they're actually trying to say here is we have better ideas by working together. So that is part of what conversational copywriting is about, is that if you read something
language touched my heart, yeah, for example.
Well, it touches, but it's just like, it's everyday language. It's not this nonsense business language. It's not hard charging. It's not the pretend urgency, like offer expires at midnight tonight. Why? Well, because the marketer knows that urgency works. So they made up this pretend deadline. I was working with a company that is a very small business. It does landscaping. And they do this kind of end of the season kind of clean up and wrap up for their clients. And they had this email they were going to send out to the clients. And they were saying, if you want us to come out to your home and clean up your yard one last time this year, call now. This offer, expires. And I said, dude, you no longer sound like that friendly, like guy who comes to help with the yard. Now you sound like some weird marketer. I said, why are you kind of making they'd taken some course or read some blog post or whatever and learned that urgency is powerful. So they kind of put it in there. And I said, look, you can come up with real life urgency. How about something like winter is coming. As soon as the hard frost or the first heavy rainfall comes, it'll be too late for us to come out and clean up your yard. So please call us now. I'm still doing urgency, but it's real. I'm not making it up. It's not marketer urgency. I'm looking at the seasons. I'm looking at something that is relevant and believable and credible.
What's an alternative to the text, for example, offer expires? Because I know every single company, well, not every, but most companies use it. Let's say when they write an email, they send an offer. Right. What is a better alternative? Let's say they just want to send a quick offer and use urgency.
I say we because I do it too. We use urgency because it gets people off the fence. And I've done experiments with this with my own community, like the conversational copywriting community. So I have members of the community who've taken the course, and then I have, like all of us, a list of people who are interested but haven't taken the course. And I played this game with that community of people who are interested but haven't taken the course. And I said, look, I could do the offer expires at midnight thing with you, but I don't want to play that game with you. So like, if you're interested, register now. Like I had one registration, all right? So then the next week I said, okay, guys, I warned you. I've tried to play nice. I was totally transparent with you last week, and I'm going to be transparent again with you now. Now what I'm going to do is actually the price is going to go up after midnight tonight. So I'm talking to them about the marketing that I'm doing, right? The techniques I'm using. So I said, seriously, you've got a discount in play. It was there last week. You didn't take advantage. It will expire tonight. And then suddenly, boom, I get all these sales. So I write to them next week and say, well, isn't that interesting? Even when we're talking together about conversational copywriting, when I put in a deadline, it still works. So I'm constantly, I'm totally transparent.
It's cognitive bias, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it's also this, people are always sitting on the fence. They're saying, and also you maybe hear the same. I constantly get back saying, hey, Nick, I'd love to take your course, but I've purchased 3 courses in the last 3 months and I haven't taken them yet. I have to finish this first. It's like everyone's buying all this stuff. So yeah, I still use urgency, but I try to be, if I have a deadline, I try to make it a real deadline. Like, in fact,
being authentic, basically.
Yeah.
As much as you can. Not just as much, being authentic, basically.
Yeah, being authentic about it, and also being transparent about it. So my last deadline was actually because I was actually changing, instead of having just one price point for my course, I had 3 different price points, different tiers. And I said, look, on Monday, it's going to be all different. If you want to get in now, get in now. And that was real because I really was changing things up. So yeah, I constantly try to be, I try to be open and transparent with my audience, whether they're buyers or not. I try to love my prospects as much as I love my buyers. I treat my prospects with the same level of respect as I treat my buyers. And that's the other thing is about the conversational approach. It's a mindset thing. where I don't treat my audience as a collection of credit cards. You know what I mean? I don't see them. That's not what I see. I don't see them as potential sources of revenue. I see them as people who, like the rest of us, are struggling through life and business and are looking for solutions. And I want to be of service and I want to help them. And that sounds a little corny, that I want to be of service and help them. But I found that actually to be a really strong business builder, because people get to recognize that I'm authentic. It's not just, I'm not writing to them as if I'm authentic. I'm writing to them that way because it is authentic. It's who I really am. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a very powerful way to do business. And I think there's a lot of that younger generation of entrepreneurs who they want it to be this way. They don't want the pretend approach. They don't want the deceptive adversarial approach to selling. They want to be able to sell in a way that is open and authentic. Maybe I'm deluding myself, but I think that's true.
I think everyone wants to be authentic and sell very easily and not think they're doing something bad because selling has this negative connotation. Sometimes.
Well, I can do. Hey, but I had a conversation with someone yesterday and he said, "Hey, Nick, you realize you're leaving cash on the table."
Do you think you're leaving cash on the table?
In the short term, sure I am. Hey, like I say, I've done this for decades. I know I could make more money with the hard-charging, manipulative approach in the short term. But if I want to build a long-term relationship with my audience and my customers, if I want them to respect me and buy from me in the long term, so I can win in the short term by being a hard-charging direct marketer, but I'm going to win in the long term by being a conversational copywriter and marketer and earning the trust and respect of my audience and customers. So they stay with me, they tell other people about me, they recommend me, et cetera, et cetera. So this guy yesterday, he said, "Nick, you're leaving money on the table." And I said, "I know." And he was like, we were like on a Zoom call, we were kind of looking at each other in the eye. And I said, "I know I am, it's deliberate." And he looked at me like I was from another planet. He couldn't. So when you say you think everyone wants to do this, they don't. There's a huge number of people out there who are perfectly happy with the hard charging, maximize this quarter's revenue approach.
Do you think this approach is good for all niches, or is there a right place to use it or a wrong place to use it?
I think it's maybe I'm being a bit idealistic, but I think it's an approach that can work for anyone. So two things. I think it is particularly relevant and important for anyone who works with clients rather than customers. So if I sell steak knives, I don't really care who the customers are. The customers don't even know who I am. I'm just selling steak knives. So the relationship, short-term or long-term, is not a priority really.
But once you create the relationship, like for a physical product?
Well, for some physical products, but garden furniture, steak knives, a fridge, not really, I don't care. But if I have a client, if I'm a freelancer, if I'm a coach, if I'm a counselor, if I'm an accountant, if I'm a realtor, if I have clients one-on-one where I'm actually going to meet these people. So if I'm going to meet and interact with, or meet maybe online, but if I'm going to interact with that person, then yes, if I want them to trust me as a provider of whatever service I offer, then I've got to build that. My acquisition has got to start building trust. I can't be some deceptive, pushy marketer to get a coaching client. And then once I've landed that client, saying, "Oh, forget about that. That wasn't really me. I'm actually a nice guy." You know what I mean? So I think the conversational approach is essential if you plan on working one-on-one with clients. That said, I got an email from someone who had taken my course on conversational copywriting, and it kind of made me smile for all kinds of reasons. He said, "Hey, Nick, loved your course. Just want to tell you this story. I actually lead a team of salespeople within an investment bank in Manhattan." Okay. So this guy had actually paid like a few bucks for a course and then shared it inside this huge investment bank. And I thought, "Man, dude, you should have called me. I'd have come and spoken to you for a day for $20,000. But anyway, what he said is he went through the course with his sales team. And he said it was like a light went off in the room. People were amazed. And I was like, "Really?" And it was like, he said, we'd been so much like brainwashed into believing our clients almost were the enemy, and we had to beat them. It was a conflict. We had to change their mind and take their money. And he said this different approach of engaging people, actually in a more conversational approach, he said we started doing it, and immediately our clients felt better and started spending more money with us. And I thought, wow. So here's me pushing it for people like coaches and counselors and therapists and freelancers. But there's actually an investment banker using it as a sales tool for really high-end investments. So that's why I say, hey, well, maybe this works everywhere.
Yeah, well, in the end of the day, I think on the other side, you have humans. So you want to talk to humans and not robots. I wanted to ask, does copywriting, and if you become better at copywriting, you think makes you a better salesperson as well?
Well, I'm actually the world's worst salesperson, one-to-one. I have a few experiences with that, and I'm absolutely terrible. So I don't, certainly in my case, being a good copywriter hasn't made me a good salesperson as a kind of one-on-one face-to-face salesperson. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty bad. I'm really bad as a face-to-face salesperson. But yeah, so I don't think being a copywriter necessarily does that. I got a funny story about that if you want to hear it, about me as a bad salesperson.
Sure, let's hear it.
All right. So one of the things I did before I got that first job, I said I kind of did all kinds of stuff when I was after school and before my first advertising jobs. And one of the things is I was actually at art college, and my best friend dropped by one day. We went for a beer and he said, hey, I'm thinking of hitchhiking to Kathmandu. Do you want to come? So naturally I said, sure. So we bought a pair of boots and a backpack. And in those days you could hitchhike through Iran and Pakistan and Afghanistan in very different days. And so we start hitchhiking to Kathmandu, and we get to this central part of Turkey, Cappadocia. And we get there at night, wake up in the morning, I get up, and it's a place of extraordinary beauty, like the landscape. So we stayed really a village in central Turkey for about a week. And we were kind of chatting with people and looking around. And then Richard said, okay, time to move on. Next stop, Eastern Turkey and then Iran. And I said, you know what? I don't think I will. I think I'm going to stay. I said that the traveling thing is cool, but what's happening is I'm spending my whole day wondering about what transport we're going to find, where we're going to sleep, where we're going to find food. And I'm not actually enjoying the places around me as much as I would like. So obviously it was a longer conversation, but he said, okay, fine, I'm going to carry on and you stay here. And when you're ready, you go home, whatever. So he carried on. And I stayed there, and I rented a place to live, which was actually a 6th century Byzantine troglodyte chapel. It was carved out of the side of the mountain. And I slept on a straw pallet, just like a medieval monk. And to make an extra bit of money, I befriended these people who owned a carpet shop. Because in fact, this was on the trail. There were lots of people like us hitchhiking through. And in the carpet shop, I struck up this deal that I would help them sell their carpets to English-speaking tourists, but on a commission basis. So they said, cool, that's great. We've got an native English speaker here to help us. So I'd sit there, hang out, drink tea, play backgammon. And then tourists would come through and I'd practice my amazing sales skills on these tourists. And over the course of a year, I sold one carpet. I was that bad.
Were you a great copywriter at the time?
No, I hadn't. I didn't even know copywriting existed. I just suddenly discovered I was.
So it was before you discovered the love of copywriting.
Yeah, before I just discovered I was a terrible salesperson. Anyway, so my friend comes back. He can't believe I'm still there, and he says, "Nick, you know what? I think it's time you went home." So we went off home, hitchhiked back to London. But that's where I discovered what a terrible salesperson I am, and I still am. I'm terrible face to face. I just feel awkward, embarrassed. I don't want to sell anybody anything. But I do feel totally comfortable with words on paper as a copywriter. So I think they are separate skills. Certainly for me, they're separate skill sets.
Yeah, I can understand. So how do you think someone can become better at copywriting? If they, let's say, just want in general have a better copywriting, I think it's a very essential skill today as everything goes online on the internet and we use words to sell or market anything.
I'll give you a couple of tips. Like for an amateur, is that one, and again, this sounds a little woo-woo, but it's really strong. Is listen. Listen. Like, I'm a complete conversation geek, all right? I'm not only a conversational copywriter, I'm fascinated by the role that conversation plays in our lives. Like your first date with your wife, do you remember your first date? You had a conversation, right?
I think so,
And
yeah.
that conversation was foundational, right, to the start of that relationship. Your first job interview was a conversation.
Yeah.
Getting to know and keep your best friends, it starts with conversation. At high school, we have like the foundation of like every relationship, everything important in our lives. It's all about the conversations we have. And if you really want to go down the geeky rabbit hole, there's all kinds of research being done right now on how smartphones and texting and social media are actually undermining our skills in conversation. But anyway, one of the things about conversation is that you're never going to have a good conversation if you don't listen. It's our greatest weakness in conversation is we talk too much and listen too little. We're too anxious to say what we want to say, and we don't listen carefully enough to what the other person is trying to say. And when that happens, you have a bad conversation, and most of us have bad conversations. And I think it's the same with selling, and it's the same with copywriting. Is the first job is to listen. And fortunately, the web is a fantastic place to listen. So if I want to sell you something, well, why don't I just go to a whole bunch of social media profiles or streams of my competitors who are trying to sell you the same thing. And then I'm going to listen to people like you in the comment streams. Or if it's a product, I'll go to Amazon, I'll read reviews. I'll go to Yelp, I'll read reviews. Like whether it's social media, whether it's review sites, I can listen to the voices of my audience. I can listen. I'm looking for emotional triggers here. What is it that you really want in this product or service? What upsets you about your current choices? What delights you? All right. So I'm going to listen. If I really listen to what, and this was really hard before the internet, it was almost impossible to listen well to your prospects. Online, it's super easy and you should do it. And most companies skate over this or don't bother. So if I listen, I know now your emotional state when you're thinking about this product or service. Specifically, I know the language that you use. Because often within companies, they have their whole separate culture and language they use, which may not be the same as the language their prospects use. So in the end, their website ends up as nonsense and doesn't connect with the reader. All right, now I know, now I've been listening and I listen to what you say. Okay. That the simplest, most powerful way to become a copywriter without any training is one, listen, and two, mirror back what your audience is saying.
Copying the same words.
It's what your therapist does when they say, what I hear you saying is, yeah, and then they mirror back to you. Mm-hmm. And mirroring language is disarming. It is engaging. It builds trust. So as an example, I have various side businesses like you. And one of my side businesses is a website all about coffee, making gourmet coffee. And I really encourage user interaction and user-generated content there. And at some point, I saw a whole bunch of people writing in that were looking for coffee makers that were plastics-free. And not like a French press. People were actually wanted like a drip brewer, plastics-free coffee maker, like a drip brewer without plastic parts, because they were scared of the plastic. And there was this phrase, plastics-free coffee maker, that kept repeating. So I wrote a blog post saying, would you like to find a plastics-free coffee maker? I was mirroring back. I wasn't being a copywriter. So part of being a conversational copywriter is to actually let go all of my training, all of my vanity. Like when I started out doing print ads, it was all about being clever, winning awards for my amazing writing skills. As a conversational copywriter, I need to let go that vanity, that ego, stop trying to be clever, and use the language of my audience, because that blog post became one of the most popular and, in fact, for me, profitable pages on my website. Mm-hmm. And I did it because I wasn't trying to be clever. I was just mirroring not just the language, but the concerns. So first I mirrored the language. Then I mirrored the concerns of like, I get it. Who knows what's coming out of that plastic when you first make coffee in a new coffee maker? Smells weird, tastes weird, probably dangerous. So I mirrored the language, I mirrored the emotions, and that's what engaged. And I try to do exactly that with any kind of copywriting I do. So in terms of learning, like even if you never take a course in copywriting, If one, you listen, and then two, you mirror language and emotions, you are now 90, honestly, you're 90% of the way there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess it's a great formula. You get into the head of your potential customer or reader or whatever it is, and you just literally use the same words and emotion. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's like the kind of jujitsu approach. It's like,
yeah, I did have more copywriting questions I wanted to ask, but there's one thing I didn't want to skip. Before we start recording, you mentioned to me that you lost $1 million in 18 months.
I did.
And I thought it would be really interesting if you can share how that happened and any lesson you learned there. I think that can be highly interesting to anyone listening.
Actually, the first thing I will say is because of that experience, whenever I'm on Instagram, on Facebook, and I see one of those quotes that say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. You know that quote?
Yeah.
I have this like, actually, even if it doesn't kill you, it can totally mess you up.
So did it make you stronger or not?
Ultimately, but that experience knocked me on my back probably for about a decade, just to dig myself out of the hole. So what I did is like I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm actually a farm boy. I grew up on a farm. And in England, where I originally come from, there are all these places called rare breed farm parks where the basically on the farm, they're maintaining old livestock breeds, the heritage breeds that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers used to use on farms. There's massive genetic value in there. These breeds are no longer being used in factory farming, so it's a conservation effort. Probably a dozen of these places in England, very popular. And I was living in British Columbia, Canada at the time. And I thought, hey, I'm going to do that here. I was close to the highway. I was close to tourists coming by. I was within sight of the highway where millions of tourists drive by. I thought, great location. I invested a huge amount of money in basically building up breeding groups of rare livestock breeds that had a history in Canada. I did everything right in terms of marketing. Like I was on radio, newspapers, TV almost every day. I had public television from the US came up, did a 1-hour documentary about us. I was on, like I say, I as a marketer, everything I could do, I did. I had Air Canada flying animals in from all over, and I would persuade them to do it for free, just for the publicity. Like I was a publicity machine for this, and I cared deeply, deeply, deeply about. I still cared deeply about that topic. And 18 months after we opened, we closed because we were just hemorrhaging money from day one. We weren't getting enough visitors. And the problem is that I made the mistake of thinking because people in England love this, people in Canada will love this. And it's not true. So in England, a lot of their self-image is tied to agricultural history. The TV shows and movies and books, people love the countryside and farming in England. In Canada, people are actually much more connected with wildlife like orcas and seals and bald eagles, far less so with agriculture. So what happened was that I followed in my heart, I guess the advice a lot of people are given, which is follow your passion. Mm-hmm. So I was deeply passionate. I did this very well. I executed really well in terms of the farm itself. I mean, I had dozens of school trips, university trips, public. It just wasn't enough. And in terms of marketing, everything I'd ever learned about marketing, I threw at it. And the outcome there was that it never was a business. It never would have been a business. And that sometimes passion for something is not enough if it's not a business. So I lost a lot, and it was personal money. We didn't go bankrupt. It took me about 10 years to pay back everything that I owed. It was a very, very hard time. Did I recover in the end? Yes, I did. Did it make me stronger? I'm not sure. It certainly pummeled me. It certainly beat me half to death at the time. And the trouble is it was such a, if you have a pizza business and you close down and walk away. We closed down. It took me about another year to find homes for these animals. These were rare, valuable animals. I couldn't just send them off for slaughter. So I was still hemorrhaging money after we closed the doors because I was still trying to find homes for the animals. So it was hard, but for sure I recovered. Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot of business lessons. I learned a lot of life lessons.
What are a few lessons which you learned from it, which right now you can reflect back and
I guess the first one is that just because something is, you believe it to be right and you are totally passionate, and if there isn't a business there, there won't be a business there. Like in other words, what you got to do is you got to first identify a need. If I'd done that, if I wasn't so passionate, if I'd paused and said, hey, before I start investing in this, I need to do some research. I need to do some interviews. I need to find out if people are interested in this. If I'd done that, I'd have saved myself a lot of grief. So I guess the first lesson I learned is first find out if there is a market and then go to that market. Because I didn't. I just assumed that if I created something beautiful enough, people would come. And I was wrong. It wasn't a business. There wasn't a market. So that was the biggest lesson I learned, is first make sure you have a market to build on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that happened, and I hope you took some good lessons from this. Yeah, and hopefully it did make us stronger.
In some respects, it did. In some respects, it did. It was punishing in lots of ways. It was hard because I loved it. It was so important to me. It was such a passion project. So I think when you lose a passion project, it's much harder than if you lose just like a business. Got it.
So, yeah, I have, I guess, a follow-up question about copywriting from here. Do you think direct mail is still effective today, and can it be conversational with it?
Yes, it's the industry is a fraction of the size that it used to be. I know people who still use it. It is very expensive today compared to digital marketing to create and produce, print, produce, and mail something to go out to hundreds of thousands of people. So you have to have, you've got to figure out your response rate. What's it going to be? 2%, 4%, 5%. And then you got to do the math on, hey, you can't use direct mail to sell something that's, sell a product that's $5. You'll never make the math work for you. Mm-hmm. You've got to have a significant lifetime value. So the people I know who are still using it are doing things like selling newsletter memberships, like $1,000 a year investment newsletter, or $500 a year investment newsletter. Those guys can make the math work. But in terms of mass direct mail, like I say, sending out hundreds of thousands, I used to, back in the 80s, would do direct mail shots of 8, 10, 20 million at a time. Very expensive. The web didn't exist back then. Very hard to do that these days. I guess still I get occasional piece of direct mail from banks and investment companies. But the math is much, much harder now. Can you be conversational in direct marketing, direct mail? Yes, you can. But even if your tone is open and authentic and honest and conversational, and I'm writing to you in everyday English, it doesn't mean to say that I don't still structure that letter. Like if I'm writing you a direct mail letter, I'm going to make sure my opening is intriguing, interesting, engaging, so that you actually get into the letter. Yeah. And I know that I still have to kind of overcome some of your uncertainties. I've got to give you the facts you need. I've got to touch on some emotional triggers so that you think, hey, yeah, this is interesting. And then as I get towards the end of that letter, I know that I got to close the sale. I know that if I just kind of coast to the end of the letter and say, bye-bye, Nick, that you won't do anything. I've got to do a little bit of that rush, even if I'm a conversational copywriter. It goes back to that point where I had that conversation with my list where I said, hey, here's what, I don't want to do your deadline. And in the end, I had to give them a deadline to make them act. It's the same with direct mail. So some of the structure of a sales letter, whether it's online or offline, remains the same. Some of those fundamentals remain the same. It's just your mindset and your language that changes, I think.
Got it. Very interesting. Yeah, I think we can start wrapping up from here. I did have a few rapid fire questions I wanted to ask you, if it's okay.
Sure.
What are you optimizing in your life right now, mostly?
Oh, interesting. Constant struggle. So I am 62. I want to be able to retire if I choose at 72. I'm about 10 years late because of my farm experience of losing everything. I really had to start over, right?
Mhm.
So I like started over, not with nothing, but with way less than nothing back at that point. So I'm a little behind in my retirement planning. But what I'm deliberately doing now is I am trying to build revenue streams, and I've always done this to some degree, that are at least in part passive. Not completely, but in part, I'm trying to generate more passive income. Because what I want to do is when I'm retired or semi-retired, I want some of that passive income to keep rolling in. So I'm trying to build kind of side businesses that I can put effort in at the front end, but that at the back end, like 2 or 3 years in, start generating a stream of income with kind of minimal input from me. So that's my plan. So let's say if I have a 10-year plan to retire if I choose to, let's say 5 years in, I want to be halfway there in terms of working less per week, fewer hours per week, generating more passive income coming in the door, whether that be a website that generates passive income through advertising, or maybe it's a property that generates income through, rental of the property or whatever. I'm just trying to find all these different ways. And like with any portfolio, I've always been keen on a diverse work portfolio. I don't like putting all my eggs in one basket. So again, I'm trying to think of, well, hang on, I've already invested this here. Is there another source of income that I can begin generating over here? So that if one receives a shock through recession, for instance, then the other perhaps doesn't. So I'm more anti-fragile, as it were.
Got it. Is there any belief you adopted in the last 1 to 3 years which helped your life in a positive way?
Last few years, something that I think I've become more aware of in the last few years, and actually before the call, I was going through your website and looking at your choice of books, your book recommendations. And one of them made me smile because actually several of them made me smile because I've read a few of the books myself. But I think one of the things that I am very deliberate about now, but have probably has been part of me for a long time, is that I take total, absolute responsibility for everything I do.
I guess you're referring to extreme
yes.
ownership book by Jocko Willing.
That's the one. Because I found myself... Recently, I spent some money on something that, in hindsight, was, I was kind of persuaded by someone that it would be a good idea, and I went along with it. And it turned out not to be a great investment. And it wasn't a damaging amount of money, but in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have gone down that route. And it's tempting at that point to think, that guy persuading me. No. I'm a grown up. I made the choice. I listened to his pitch. I said yes. I sent the money. Totally my choice. Totally my responsibility. So I'm a huge fan of this. And I try to share it with family and friends and definitely kids, is that always, like everything we do, almost everything we do, we have a choice. I mean, there are some things in life that are not choice. We can fall sick. We can be injured, whatever. But in most business decisions, business choices, personal life, I think we could all do better by taking on that mindset of I take total, absolute responsibility for the choices I make. I will not blame my parents. I will not blame my friends. I will not frame. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's not
totally.
No, my parents didn't make me do X. They said I should, and I chose to go along with them. Or no, that guy persuaded me to invest in that thing. Was it his fault? No, that's what he does. I take total responsibility for saying yes. And I think when you do that, it's on the one hand, for some people it feels hard, but it's actually immensely liberating. Because what it does is it removes so much baggage, as it were.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you're letting go the baggage of feeling that other people control your life. If it wasn't for, if I'd got that, if things, it is such a burden to place responsibility for your life on other people, because there's nothing you can do about it. You're no longer in control. You become a victim in your own life. when you take absolute responsibility for every choice you make, whatever the influence, that is true liberation. Now you're free. Not always easy, but yeah, absolutely. So that's, like I say, I think I've done that for quite a long time. I've been more mindful about it and been more kind of self-aware about that mindset in recent years. And yeah, it's great. It's great. And absolutely, I try to teach this to my kids and everyone around.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I love the belief. Nick, where can people find you online, and where, if someone wants to delve more into conversational copywriting, where do you think they should go? Where would you want to send people?
Excellent. Hey, we were having such fun. I completely forgot. I meant to promote myself. So
if you want.
If you want to find out more, you can go to conversationalcopywriting.com. If you want to reach out to me personally, just write to nick@conversationalcopywriting.com. If you want to plunge into my own evil funnel, you can go to conversationalcopywriting.com/step up. Is one word, no hyphen. Conversationalcopywriting/step up.
I'll put in the show notes as well.
All right. And there you can, you'll get on my list and you'll get a freebies. It's the usual thing. But if you're interested in how conversational copywriting might work within that traditional process of getting someone to sign up, then if for no other reason, sign up just to see how I write to you and how I engage with you. Because, yes, I use the structure of you'll receive a series of free items. I'm trying to draw you into the conversational community. But hopefully I do it in a way that is open and respectful and conversational and not pushy and adversarial. You tell me if I get it right.
Sounds good. Nick, thank you very much for taking the time and coming on the show today and chatting about your stories and copywriting. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I didn't ramble on about stuff for too long.
That was cool. All right.